Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on a weekend. It is incredibly warm here in Portland, Oregon right now. It's over 100 degrees. It's crazy. So for those of you watching across the pond, I'm not going to convert that from Fahrenheit to Celsius. You can figure it out through Google. Before we get started, I want to thank my sponsors at 5 Star Guitars. They have been incredibly supportive of me. They are based in Beaverton, Oregon. So if you're interested in buying guitars and you want to buy local, we want your support. Go to www.fivestarguitars.com and check out the inventory. If you want to buy it elsewhere, the great thing is that there's no sales tax. So you're going to save a ton of money by buying great guitars. So www.fivestarguitars.com, there's their logo. You recognize it. They have repairs and they've got lessons. So even if you want to do virtual lessons with pros like Jennifer Batten, my buddy who I'm interviewing next is going to have his lesson with that guitar right over there in the background. And he'll get Jennifer Batten on board. So check it out today. This is going to be awesome. I'm really excited about this. One of my favorite bands from the late 80s, early 90s in the Portland, Oregon area took the world by storm. They should have been the next big thing. They were in my mind, and we're going to find out what exactly happened because my friend Paul Mortlock has been talking to them for years about the Dan Reed Network. So let's get into this now. Hang on tight. Let's talk to Paul Mortlock, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Good, very good. Glad to be here. How you doing, everyone?
You're Manchester, England, huh?
Manchester, yeah. Well, you can see just out the window there. It's just it's 9 o'clock in the evening, so yeah, it's getting pretty dark, but it's nice and warm here. We've had like a great week of weather, so yeah, it's not quite 100 degrees, although I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's warm.
It's too warm here, man. But it typically is rainy, as you know. You've been to Portland a few times. You know that it's
what we have in common.
That's true.
Yeah, if it's not raining, it's about to rain. You know.
Yeah, no, it's been beautiful. I'm not going to complain about it. It's and hopefully, as they say, the sunlight's supposed to kill this virus that we've got. So maybe it'll go away. But we're not even going to talk about that stuff, man, because right now we get to escape the thought of a virus, and we're going to talk about fun stuff. Let's get right into this, man. You've been working on Slam, the documentary for the Dan Reed Network, for a couple of years now.
That's right. Yeah. It just literally fell into my lap. This guy called Dan Pred called me up, and he's like, "Hey man, do you wanna make a music video, man?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll make a music video for you." So when they came over to Manchester, we went to a disused factory in Bolton, and we shot music videos for the Divided, off the first of the new batch of records, if you like.
Okay.
And we shot another one as well. I can't remember what it was. I'm sure Dan will remember. And it was at that point I realized these guys have got a story. They're more than just a bunch of guys who've rocked out back in the 80s and 90s, disappeared and came back. There's a lot more to them than met the eye. So I didn't realize at first. They asked me to do a few other projects as well. Like I got involved with Dan Reed did a solo record tour. We went to we did it in different chapels and churches. I made a DVD for him, and I kind of, as that was happening, he and I were talking, and the more he gradually confided in me, the more like we were both sort of saying, this could be something in this. So and that culminated in me sort of traveling all over the world and interviewing all kinds of people.
Had you known the Dan Reed Network before that?
I'd never heard. I have to hold my hands up. I mean, a few of my friends had heard of them.
Okay.
I talked about them, and it's like, yeah, we've heard of that band. I'd never heard of them.
Okay.
It probably isn't really my thing anyway. And it wasn't until I met the guys and actually started listening to music, it was like, yeah, this is great. This is really good.
I'm interested. Yeah. Like you said, it's not your thing. What stylistically, what kind of music were you in?
I mean, I'm a grunge boy, 90s grunge boy. I mean, I am into like, obviously Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all those bands, that came from your area.
Right. Well, you got your Sub Pop shirt on to represent.
Sonic Youth, the Pixies. Probably the Pixies is the band that I was into the most.
Okay.
So like kind of really alternative, kind of like wave sort of grunge thing. That really, ticks the boxes for me.
It's interesting because having talked to you a little bit about the documentary, I think it probably came up as a recurring theme that era was kind of part of the demise of the band, right?
Very much. I mean, if they hadn't have made their own demise, so to speak, could they have outlived grunge? I think they probably would have adapted. But it was a really tough thing to do back then. It was really hard for, you know, a lot of the bands just had to go away and hide, you know, and the bands like Poison and Rat, they disappeared, probably a good thing. And I don't know how it would have worked out for them. I'd like to think that they would have, you know, because they're such talented musicians. And
right.
Dan kind of went on and did his own grunge thing anyway. I forget the name of it, but that certainly had more of a darker, more introspective edge of the thing that he went on to do.
Yeah, he had Adrenaline Sky and then Maggie's Dream, right? He had both of those, but yeah, and you know, those were interesting because to me they kind of reminded me a little bit of Jane's Addiction, Smashing Pumpkins kind of vibe, which was a little bit like that era, and it didn't. I guess maybe it sounded like maybe he tried to adapt, but I think it was just that other musicians kind of grabbed hold of him and pulled him into those projects. But he'd know more than I about.
Absolutely, and I think you get tarred with a certain brush as well. When people remember you as one thing. I think it's very hard back then. I mean, it's hard now, but you know, back then I'm sure it was even harder to move from one genre to another. But like, you know, without any kind of bleed, any crossover, and people saying, well, I don't know if I believe this because you did that. And
right.
I mean, I'm trying to think of bands who have done it. Like one strangely that springs to mind is Pantera. They went from being obviously a bit of glam hair metal band to start with, spandex and whatever, and then obviously went into become this incredibly syncopated hard rocking band. So yeah, bands definitely transitioned that era for sure.
Pretty rarely though, you're right. And you know, with Pantera, for example, I think they didn't have Phil Anselmo in the glam era as much, right? They had different singers. So when they switched over, having a singer that fit that vibe, and it for the Dan Reed Network, it's not like you can get a new Dan Reed, right? There's only one. And so,
there's only one for sure.
You know, having not known the network before, and you said that Dan Reed contacted you to come in and do this album or this video shoot. So, you know, you can maybe paint the stage for that a little bit. The network was over touring in Europe, right? They had some shows in the UK.
They were playing shows. I think they'd done all their shows. This is, I think this is kind of like mid 2017.
Okay.
And like I say, you know, it was actually Dan Pred who called me up.
Yeah.
I was like, hey man, you want to do this video? And it's like, for a second, we talked about money and all the things, and I was pretty busy. I had a lot going on, and I was thinking, do I have time for this? Do I really want to do this? So you know, it could have gone either way, and it has been definitely a pivotal moment in moving my life in terms of being a filmmaker.
Sure.
Most of my background is working behind camera in terms of like being a director of photography, a cameraman. And then all of a sudden I get this chance to work on a project where, you know, I'm the producer, director, and I'm in charge. So that was kind of nice. So yeah, they came over, we hired this big studio, loads of lights, like a revolving 360 track, looked absolutely fantastic. And yeah, the guys were a dream. I was just, you know, there was no bullshit. There was no, you know, big I am. It's just everybody turned up, did what they had to do, and we had a really good time doing it. And I didn't really have much to do with any of the guys except for Dan Pred. I was dealing a lot with him, and we were talking, you know, pretty much on a weekly basis leading up to it with all the details of how we're going to work things out. And yeah, it wasn't until a little bit after that I started sort of getting to know the rest of the guys, you know, especially Dan Reed and Melvin and the rest of those guys. I think they were probably a little bit standoffish, like, who is this English guy? What's he doing? You know,
sure.
I'm sure I've seen lots of people come and go in their careers, and you know, is this guy going to hang around? So I think it took them a little bit of time to trust me, and hopefully now they do.
You know, when that happened, you did the divided video shoot. So Dan Pred, he coordinates with you. You get the location, you get the video together, all the sort of technical things that have to go on there. And you said that you got to know the guys later on. Was that during the process of shooting the video, or did you?
It was even later than that. You know,
okay.
After that, the next thing we did, I was trying to think about this last night. It was, as I mentioned, it was the tour with Dan Reed, and that's where we started to get to know each other a little bit. And Dan's got a really left field sense of humor, and I think I have a bit as well. So we, you know, we'd be in the back of the van, and he'd pretend to be asleep, and then he'd like wake up and he'd shout "sharks" or something, and he'd just do so, and then he'd pretend to go back to just do some weird shit. So yeah, we were all laughing our heads off in the band. It was great fun. It was great fun to be around. So that was kind of the beginning of that. And then the guys came over to Manchester to do. They did this brilliant concept, which Dario, Dan's manager, and Dan came up with, which was to record the next record or parts of the record with the fans in situ. So they did one in Manchester, they did one in Berlin, they did one in Sweden, they did one in New York, and they did one in Portland, I think. There may have been another, I can't remember. And I did the Manchester one, New York, and Portland.
Okay.
I think it was during that vibe we really, that time maybe they got to know me a little bit later, and it was great. And by the time we got to Portland, I was sleeping on Rob Daker's couch. So
you got to sleep on that couch. Yeah, I've been in that room. I know that that instills a lot of trust, actually, the fact that he let you into that world.
Absolutely. They were really, really cool. And we smoked a do, put the world to rights, ate Mexican food. It was a great time. And of course, in between, shot a lot of stuff and interviewed a lot of people, which I'm sure we can come on to.
Okay, so I'm thinking about that process where you did the tour, and then I would imagine you talked to a handful of people that let you in on the fact that Dan Reed Network had this great following, right? Especially in Europe. Being a Portland resident myself, I know that a lot of people here feel like Dan Reed Network is sort of family to them, whether they were related or dated certain persons in the band or whatever, but they do feel like they have this special connection because Portland is a pretty small town comparatively to like LA or New York. And the fact that band sort of put Portland on the map in that hard rock way, especially touring with like the Stones and Bon Jovi. Then when you find out that Europe really took hold of Dan Reed Network, and there's a huge following there. I remember seeing them in Wales a couple of years ago. I was a day off on my tour and went over to see them, and it was really cool to see them in this big open shed, with a few thousand people just crammed in there, rabid fans. It's nice to see that the following is all there. I'm guessing that after you shot the music videos and you talked to people that were fans, is that what kind of lit the fire for you to say there's probably something more to the history of this band that might be worth shooting a documentary?
I can't quite pinpoint the moment of when I thought, well, we should do this. It was all kind of coming to a head when we were doing the recordings with all the fans in Manchester, and we kind of did a whole bunch of interviews then, just for what we thought might be like DVD extras or something like that. And I sat down with Melvin and Brian and Dan Pred, Dan Reed, and with all the guys and did little separate interviews. And it was during that time, I think, I really got a feel for how much sadness, actually, how it still existed within the guys about how it had gone down.
Really?
Yeah. And how they still wish to this day that it would have gone a different way. And I can quote Dan Pred. Dan Pred said, he regarded it as like this phantom pain that he had, for years and years. This thing just wouldn't go away. He had this band and then they split up and he's like, oh, what am I going to do with myself? I'm 30 years old. As he puts it, I'm a grown adult, and
he's still not really.
No, he's not. And what am I going to do with my life? And then he said, just at that moment, that very moment when I was about to let it go, he gets a call from Dan Reed, and it's all coming back again.
Incredible.
So it is, and like, when you know them, and like the honest, genuine emotions you get from these guys when you interview them. I mean, people who've seen the footage are just like, they just instantly warm to them because there's that human element, there's a human aspect. Because who hasn't, stood in the shower with a hairbrush and pretended they were Mick Jagger, or pretended they were on stage in front of 80,000 people? It's everybody's dream.
Absolutely.
And I think to have been in a cigarette paper's grasp of something awesome, and have just have fallen that little bit short, I think there's a slightly voyeuristic, interesting element to it as well, because people want to know what happens when that doesn't quite hit. So it's a fascinating story, and they are genuinely interesting people.
They really are. It's funny that you mentioned talking to Brian and Melvin, too, especially Melvin. Oh my God, have you ever met a more dynamic character in your life? He really, He
What a,
really, like, he and I had a conversation on Alexis Live a couple of weeks ago, and I swear to God, I could do one of those weekly with him because he has so many stories and so much
yeah,
personality,
yeah,
and every one of those guys had that kind of, really interesting personality, a lot of humor, and there's vibe. That's the one thing. There are bands that, especially in around the 2000s, so it was kind of a trendy thing to be shoegazer and kind of melancholy, and there's nothing about that in this
yeah,
band. There's nothing tentative about the band. Any of the members. The way that Brian James plays guitar is as dynamic
sensational.
and explosive as anybody you've ever seen. And it's interesting to me that like each guy went off and they did their own thing after
Yeah,
the demise. And, fans of Dan Reed Network that are watching this and know the story, there were different rumors about how things went down, and I know that when you did this documentary, as you were filming and doing the interviews, I bet you got different perspectives on what people thought went down at the end. From here, everybody was saying, "Oh yeah, Dan Reed just wanted to be an actor. He shaved his head and he wanted to be an actor, and so he quit playing music because he wanted to do his own thing that way." Or, people started saying he got way into drugs and he, left, music because he just couldn't hang. And there's always a little element to some truths of rumors, but as you interviewed a lot of people, both inside and outside the scene, did you finally get to a common thread, especially through the members, where you actually, because you've got so much footage that nobody's ever seen, not just of their live performances, but behind the scenes stuff that's real stories about the Dan Reed Network. Did you feel like you really got a great picture painted of the timeline and the chronology?
well, you'll have to watch the film.
Well, and okay.
Yeah, I did, absolutely, and it was really interesting to see it come out. And pretty much, there's an element to everything that you said. I mean, Dan he's a true artist, man.
Yeah.
There's no other way you can describe him. He lives and breathes every second of everything that he does, and it's amazing to see. I was in his studio in Prague last week, and he started playing me something that him and Brian are working on. It's just mind-blowingly brilliant. And he's not one of these guys. He's everything is methodical. He's got it all worked out. He's super planned and organized when it comes to all that stuff. So it's a real privilege to see him and work with. But yeah, to come back to your point, I think all of the above, all of those reasons were all, came to a head and culminated in what it did. And I think the early warning signs of Dan shaving his head, not wanting to be the poster pin-up boy, wanting to be respected for his music. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And perhaps at the time somebody should have thought about it. But I had a conversation with Terry Finley, who obviously was on this show a month or so ago. And he said that, at the time, it was completely the wrong thing to do, because everybody now, the first question was going to be when he sat down in front of a reporter was, "So why do you shave your head?"
Right. More attention
on his image. I think that, and the fact that maybe back in those days, by his own admission, he was a perfectionist, perhaps to a fault, where he would just want everything just as he wanted it. And you know what, it's his band, so he can do. But I think that was probably part in not being the best thing to do for his own mental state. And he says that in the film, so I'm not making things up for him.
Sure.
You can come and say that. The drugs thing came along later. That came along when he came back to Portland, and had a bloody good time, it would seem.
Yeah. I was, witness to that somewhat. To me, and I'll tell you, you and I had that conversation, I think, when we had a little discussion about my perspective on the band. I was such a fan of the band in Montana when I was high school and college, and the band I was in covered Dan Reed Network songs, right? And we changed our name to Slam because we were doing Make It Easy and Slam. And a lot of people thought those were our original songs. They hadn't heard of the network in Montana. And so people would always beg us to do your original songs. I'm like, well, those aren't our original songs. But as a fan, when I moved to Portland, I was so excited to go to this town that bred a band like the Dan Reed Network for all sorts of reasons. Stylistically, I loved the combination of the funk and the rock. They were like, to me, they represented Living Color meets Fishbone meets King's X and all those bands that I really admired. But, you know, they had the multi-ethnic thing, but the songs represented the time. They were really big hooks. The drummer blew my mind. I was a huge fan of the drummer at that time, and Dan Pred and I have become great friends since. But when I moved to town, and I mentioned this to you, I couldn't wait to meet these guys because I didn't know the band had broken up. I asked at this duplication place, whatever happened to the Dan Reed Network guys? And they said, well, this is the drummer right here. And he was working a day job, and I was crushed. He'd shaved his head, no short hair, working a job. And as a, you know, early 20s child of rock and roll, I just was devastated because I felt like that band was poised and primed for the biggest, you know, success. Now that really was the grunge era. And I hadn't thought about that era affecting what the Dan Reed Network had done, because to me, they didn't fit in that the demographic of the hair bands, the glam stuff. They had the look a little bit, but stylistically, the music spanned across a whole bunch of different styles. You know, they carried the funk stuff from early on. And so to me, it wasn't a really dated period sounding band at all. So when they weren't together, I was crushed. And thankfully, Dan Pred was so eager to just talk about his story and talk to me as a, you know, fellow drummer and give me, you know, he was never really critical of the decisions that were made that I remember. What I do remember was the sadness you talked about. He was disappointed because he and Dan Reed had moved out from South Dakota. Yeah, I mean, high school together. And so their childhood dream didn't end up being, you know, the same. And at that point, I remember saying, do you think there ever going to be a chance for you guys to get together? And he said, no, you know, it's never going to happen. You know, there's a little disconnect between, you know, Dan Reed and some of the guys in the band. I understood later on, but it's amazing to me and like all the fans that so many years later, not only did they reunite, but there was a renewed energy. I think egos had been tempered a little bit. I think there's humility, and you saw that, I'm sure. I'm really eager to see, you know, in your process of interviewing, you talked to all the guys in the band, right?
Absolutely.
And then you got all sorts of guys outside the band, some of the influential people that worked with them. I've seen the sizzle reel, you know, you had everybody from Richie Sambora to Corey. I talked about Living Color, Corey Glover from Living Color, Nile Rogers, and Steven Van Zandt, and all these amazing figureheads of rock and roll. And not only did they have a great perspective on what the band represented to them, did they talk to you a little bit about what happened afterwards? Did any of those guys mention it's too bad they weren't around anymore? Too bad they broke up? Or
I think because they didn't really sort of, there was no explosive breakup. It was
right.
just, it was Dan Reed very slowly drifting off into wherever he was going to drift off to and not really communicating with the guys. So I think it missed most people I spoke to. In fact, I think pretty much everybody. It just sort of passed them by. You know, 1 minute they were there, and they were like, the next minute it was like, hey, what happened to that band? So I remember, Steven Van Zandt was an absolutely brilliant interview.
Okay.
Probably my favorite thus far. I mean, it was a tricky one to get, as you can imagine. And after months of toing and froings and emails, they're like, okay, he'll do it. Will he come to the Fillmore in San Francisco? I was like, does a bear shit in the woods? It's like,
yeah.
I'm gonna come to the Fillmore in San Francisco. So I flew out there via LA because we were supposed to get someone else from Motley Crue, but that never happened. I won't mention their name. And then I went up there and sat down in a room with him, and it was like the guy is just a music encyclopedia. He just knows about everything. He has a fantastic considered opinion on everything.
Yeah.
And it was a dream to do. And you know, he and I talked about all different permutations of what could have happened. But I think the thing for him is just this band had everything. You know, they were years before their time, that in stylistically and also in racial makeup. And I think he was just gutted that this band didn't exist anymore. He and Dan were, I think they were good friends.
Okay.
Back in the day. I don't know if they were drinking buddies or what. He wouldn't let on exactly what it was, what the connection was, but I got a feeling it probably wasn't playing Monopoly in a hotel
Right.
room. It was something a little bit more interesting. But yeah, he was like, you know, this band, he said Ritual. It's like, forget it. This is one of the best songs you'll ever hear.
Right.
And like his face kind of lit up when he was
Yeah.
talking about it, as only a real musician, you know, a real music fan does. So I mean, it's a total pleasure to talk to him about that, and he just had nothing but great and interesting things to say, not only about the band but also about, you know, the multi-ethnicity of the band, you know, coming in the late 80s, early 90s, and unfortunately what a problem that was.
You know, like he was very familiar with that too, right? I mean, with the E Street Band, right? I mean, that band was loaded with different ethnical backgrounds and
Yeah.
ethnic
He said,
backgrounds.
I did ask him about that actually, but he said they never talked about it. It was never a topic of conversation.
Well, sure.
I forget the name of their saxophone player.
Clarence Clemens.
Yeah, who recently passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, was that a conversation that you ever had with Clarence? And he kind of like shot me this look, and he's like, nah.
Yeah.
We never talked about that. And he wasn't being, he was like, you know, it just didn't come up. It just wasn't a thing.
When you're in the band, it wouldn't, right? But outside, I'm sure everybody saw that, because when you're an outsider, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say, when you're an outsider and you're looking at a band like that, you know, oh, look at this. We've got a guest. Hi, Dan Fred. How you doing?
What's up, people?
This is great, man. I appreciate you jumping in here. Can hear you fine. Yeah, I was just mentioning, you know, outsiders that that looked at bands like the Dan Reed Network or you know, Bruce Springsteen's band, any of those. While when you're in the band, obviously you're not talking about the different ethnicities. You know, you might joke around and talk about stereotypes and that kind of thing, as a brother might do, but you don't talk about, hey, look, you know, we're 4 different ethnicities, you know, playing, you know, these shows, and this is what we represent. But outsiders, fans of the band, that I think that's a real positive point. They can see that there's a brotherhood. People can look past ethnic backgrounds and, you know, different races and actually just cohabitate as musical family. And that's one of the things I think people really feel connected to with the network. Dan Pred, you could chime in there, because I would imagine.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Actually, I jumped in while you guys were talking about little Steven Van Zandt.
Yeah.
So let me just roll back.
Okay.
Slightly, because Paul, when I saw the sizzle reel and I saw Steven Van Zandt on that, I about shit my pants. I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe you interviewed him. Actually, I saw it for the first time, and you had Richie Sambora on there. I was like, what?
Look at that. Oh yeah. Nice.
Oh,
I mean, what a dude.
What a dude.
My computer's beeping. So anyway, I couldn't believe all these people you were getting. And I remembered way back in the day when we were recording Slam at the power station. No, we did drum. Anyway, I digress. I went and met little Steven Van Zandt with Dan, and I could not appreciate then who he was. I knew he was Bruce Springsteen's man, and of course Bruce Springsteen was huge and everything, but I didn't really appreciate the level of amazing talent that guy was. And then I got his solo record, which became one of my favorite records of all times. And then fast forward to way after the band broke up, where I become like a total Bruce Springsteen fanboy. And like now, all these years later, I can appreciate how huge that is to have little Steven Van Zandt in the film. And the guy is amazing. And Paul, I can't wait to see the whole interview. I mean, what he says on the sizzle reel is kind of, I'm trying to figure out what he's talking about. He kind of mumbles through some stuff.
We can't reveal unless Paul's willing to share. I know, Paul, you had a couple of little things that you wanted to share from the sizzle reel. Are you able to share a couple of tiny bits?
I am, yeah. I'll just share with you just the beginning that we're working on at the moment. Oh, see, it says you've disabled my screen sharing.
Oh, here, let me make sure that you're a host, my friend. You know, and folks, if you're watching this right now, this is really cool. Nobody has seen this other than a couple of insiders here. So you're first to witness some of these clips here. Paul, you should be able to share now.
Okay.
All right.
You changed it.
This band was going to be one of the biggest bands in the world. I really believe that.
It wowed me, you know, being a farm boy from South Dakota and to be at that level to where you're playing 10, 20,000 people in different arenas.
I mean, this is a dream come true.
We were nervous as hell. At the same time, though, it was a high you just couldn't imagine.
We were going to be a huge band. I mean, I always knew that was inevitable.
We wanted to prove something, and we went out there and just kicked ass every chance we could and said, you will not forget us after you see us.
Inside, I wasn't sure that I was ready for all that.
All right, that's your lot.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's I love that. And right after that point, I remember the goosebump moments because the music kicks in. Then you got all sorts of interviews, and you mentioned a handful of the guests. So we were just talking about Steven Van Zandt. Who else did you end up talking to in the movie?
So we talked to Nile Rogers. That was a great one. I mean, I'd been chasing Nile for about a year, maybe longer than a year. And finally we tied him down and we went down to Abbey Road in London and shot him there. And nothing but an absolute gentleman, a font of musical knowledge, a wonderful guy to hang out with. He has such stringent time slots. So we got him for I think we got him for 16 minutes.
Oh,
and I absolutely nailed it for 16 minutes. It's just question. But he was the kind of guy you could have just spent the rest of the day chatting with him. He's really lovely, really smart, and had some really interesting perspectives, not on only the music style, which obviously he was involved in, but again, going back to the multi-ethnicity of the band, he had some interesting points of view on that as well, which is also explored in the film. We also went to, where did I go to? Toronto to do Sass Jordan. I don't know how, she was huge in Canada.
You bet. Yeah, I loved her.
Yeah. She was fantastic. I think she was or is still quite close with Blake Sakamoto, and he helped broker that deal and pull that together. So that was great. Probably more recently, we had Zia McCabe from the Dandy Warhols, who was friends with Dan during Dan's party phase at the Ohm, during his lost summer, so to speak. So
was it just a summer?
But yeah, it was a few summers, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Who else did we do? Yeah, Corey Glover was brilliant. Again, obviously he was really interesting and forthright on race, on musical style, also talking about the era in general. And that was actually a little bit of a fanboy moment for me as well, because I was a huge fan of Living Colour back in the day. I was absolutely blown away when I first heard their record. I was just, it was insane. It just blew my mind.
That was a game changer.
For me, you know, as a white kid living in a white town, working class town, I'd never heard anything or seen anything like this, and it was an amazing moment for me. It sticks into my mind now, quite a few years later. So meeting him was wonderful.
You remember, Paul? Sorry to interrupt. You remember seeing Corey Glover in the film Platoon?
I do indeed. Yeah.
You guys talked about that?
We did. I mean, he said that, you know, he kind of drew the comparison a little bit. Like he liked to go out and do other things, so he could understand why Dan had wanted to maybe try a few other different things as well. Because I think Corey originally may have come from acting, or he definitely had a strong acting background.
Danny, his dad was quite a popular actor, or not his dad, his uncle.
Who's his uncle?
Danny Glover.
That's his uncle?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, I know that makes sense. I mean, I didn't realize that. That's, you know, who knew? But I guess you did.
Corey, if you're watching, you can chime in here.
Yeah.
And I know Sambora was a huge one, right? I mean, Sambora was like great.
I mean, that was on, off for so long. It put years on me, that interview. We were literally parked in the car outside his beautiful complex in Calabasas, it's outside LA. And, you know, on the phone to his agent, and then it was going backwards and forwards. This is happening. I'm like, and it happened. And we drove into this amazing place, sat down in the biggest house I've seen in my life. And were made to feel very, very welcome. And I sat and interviewed him in his front room at his grand piano. And it was kind of a surreal experience, really. But yeah, I mean, he was like, this band were huge. And as soon as I'm sure he's talking about him and John, heard this record, we were like, well, these guys have got to be on tour with us. They're fantastic.
Really? So yeah, they actually handpicked the band wanting to take them out.
I mean, they had the same management, I think, at
Right.
that time, or definitely the same record label. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. But what was interesting from Rich is like they really genuinely liked the band. They really genuinely loved them, and they like, you know, about Dan Reed. Well, this kid's a star. He's a star. So
You know what's that shows a lot of confidence, honestly. I mean, Dan Pred, you'll agree with me. A lot of major, huge international rock stars and bands don't necessarily want to have an opening act that might be competitive, right? If they've got a star up front, if they felt like, you know, you could add to their draw, that's one thing. But Bon Jovi had enough of a draw. They didn't need to have another band opening. But
no, I agree. I mean, and I can't really speak to whether or not a band wants an up and coming, live act to open for them. I would say most bands are confident. I mean, there's no blowing Bon Jovi off the stage
Right.
during that time or any time. I mean, he's such a phenomenal performer. And of course, that was during the New Jersey tour.
huge.
And there was no bigger band on the planet, or
Right.
they were as big as any band on the planet, any Rolling Stones or U2. And so there was just no competition as far as I'm concerned. And as far as they're concerned either, I would have to say. However, I think there was some competition ginned up in the press.
Oh,
There was magazines.
I have it on pretty good authority that, they probably, definitely on John's side, I mean, it was like a PR person's wet dream. These two incredibly talented, beautiful looking men.
Yeah.
Let's get them on the front of Kerrang. Let's get them on the front of Smash Hits. And, at some point, John did turn around and say, well, why is this guy here again? Why? I think it took a little bit of they should be here for me. I should be on the front. And yet it was them getting double billing. So there probably was a little bit of an issue over that.
Well, and like I was saying, there was things ginned up in the press. Like, Dannery Network, the band that's making Bon Jovi spit blood every night, headlines like that. That was one of the headlines, and I would just look at that and be embarrassed because I was at those concerts, and when Bon Jovi took the stage, there was no spit and blood. That guy was crushing it.
Yeah.
You were right at the back, Dan. You were right at the back. You couldn't have possibly known what it was like. I mean,
this great times on that tour. They used to explode the bombs on Living on a Prayer, right?
Yeah.
All that you got. Whoa, there it goes. So we were back one time, way back in the cement loading area back there, and the guys would clear the area. The bombs are gonna go off. The bombs are gonna go off. And everyone would get ready for it. And this one night, there's this poor little dog in this little cement entryway. This dog had got in there, and those bombs went kabam! Right?
No.
The dog goes, "Ah!" and you yelped and peed all over the floor. I'll never forget that. It was the funniest thing.
That was probably Heather Locklear's dog, and she's back there with, yeah. It's just great to have you recollect these stories. Did you, Dan Pred, were you telling some of these stories as Paul was doing interviews for the movie and the documentary?
I don't know. I mean, Paul and I, we talked 3 or 4 times, and I answered everything candidly.
Certainly did.
Kevin, my stories with Kevin, those will go to the grave with me.
No, I already told him. Sorry.
But no, I mean, anything, Paul, that you asked me, I addressed, and I don't know if I did any extraneous, yakking, but I'm not much of a talker on camera, but
I know. That's why I'm loving that you're doing this. What's really cool about this, though, and Dan Pred, before you jumped on, Paul and I were talking about the moment in which he felt like there's something more to this than just hanging out and getting extra footage for DVD extras. But this is a documentary that really covers the arc of a band that was on the rise in the US and internationally. And it really was a band that was poised to have not only international sort of recognition, but this band crossed over, right? You sort of transitioned between hair rock and funk, and you had the combination of Bon Jovi meets Living Colour. Really, that was a great blend of those two bands. And while those two bands had quite a bit of international success, the Dan Reed Network should have had that success. This documentary, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, really talks about the rise and fall of the band, really the arc of that success. And then do you get into the reformation of the band and the sort of rebirth of what's gone on in the last 10 years?
Absolutely. And just going back to what you were saying before Dan Pred really interrupted us, the kind of mental state, or of the whole band, and Dan Reed in particular, and we also focused quite a lot when we were traveling west from New York. We put a little stop into where both the Dans are from. So we went to Aberdeen, and then we went over to Dan's farm, and we sat down and we did a little interview there, and we talked about his childhood and where he'd come from. And I think a lot of his later decisions, and I'm sure Dan Pred, you might want to chime in on this as well, is a lot of his later decisions perhaps are based on some of his experiences that he had as a kid growing up.
Oh yeah, you want to talk a little bit about your connection with Dan Reed and your guys' childhood?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. So as I think it's common knowledge to any fan of the band and any close friend of mine or anyone that Dan Reed and I did grow up as kids back in South Dakota. Dan, being from a farm town and a year older than me, would come into my hometown for karate lessons and guitar lessons on the weekend. And he met our guitar player at the time, whatever his name was. And my guitar player came to me and said, "Yeah, man, I met our singer. It's got to be him. He's the coolest guy ever. You got to meet him." And so on a weekend, I got on my bike. That's how long ago that was. And I pedaled down and met Dan. And sure enough, I met him at the music store. He was about to take his guitar lessons. He had a cool mustache, knew karate and kung fu, and he looked cool and sang cool. And as I knew it right then and there that he was absolutely going to be the singer in the band. But then we became like great friends and spent the rest of all of the high school together. I never really had any other social life per se during high school other than the band that we had, Nightwing. That's what we were called.
Right.
Right, Nightwing. And so we spent all our time practicing and doing other sundry stuff. And but I wasn't a member of any other cliques. There was Motorheads and Jocks and Stoners and all this, in high school. But I was in a band. Like that was like all I needed, all I knew, right? And my job, of course. And but that was it, And then Dan graduated a year ahead of me and off to Oregon. He moved back because he was originally from Oregon. And I was like, well, what am I going to do after I graduate? I'm going to go to Oregon too, keep the band going. And that was it. I mean, that was my whole high school experience, after having met Dan, actually longer than high school. So
sure.
Yeah.
And I know you touched on it with Paul, got some great clips of that about you really seeing at that point that your destiny was to be, all you wanted to do was be a rock star, rock drummer in a band. And so after Dan Reed chose to go a separate way, and I don't want to give away any of your nuggets, Paul, but it's really special to me to see this opportunity come back around, not just as a fan of the band and as a friend of you, Dan Pred, but I love, Paul, you really captured it in a great way, that this heartache from the band members, that just like this longing. You think about a relationship, and a lot of people don't really understand that a band relationship, members of a band, how it connects to a possible, romantic relationship that somebody might have. 4 or 5 members of a band are like 4 or 5 married people, right? You travel the world together, you're sleeping, in bunks together sometimes and that kind of thing. And when one of those partners decides that they just don't want to be in a relationship anymore, and it affects all the members of the band, all the members of the family, what a really uprooting and heartbreaking situation it might be. And a lot of times when you hear about bands that do that, they never speak to each other again. You know, I mean, there's a million VH1 behind the music stories that talk about that. And it was one of the reasons I knew you, Dan Pred, told me, I just don't see it happening as much as I wanted to see it happen. And I would ask you all the time. And I realize now, boy, that's like saying, you know, are you and your, you know, somebody, you know, like, hey, Joe Smith, are you and your ex-wife ever going to get back together again? You know, it's kind of a hard thing to ask and really a hard thing to answer. Right. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's true and everything you say, and I'm sorry to step on you there, but you know, it was odd coming to the end of the career of the network round one, only because we actually all got along pretty good, even though near the end there was tension for sure,
Yeah.
Amongst certain members of the band. But we didn't have that classic story where we were throwing beer bottles at each other and fighting and fucking each other's wives and girlfriends. None of that happened in our band. We were tight, you know. And so all of a sudden we broke. Why would you break up? I mean, everyone's gonna fight over stuff, right?
Right.
But you don't get divorced over that, you know. I mean, plus the band kind of had peaked, but we were ready to rock and roll. I mean, you know, we had the, you know, we got out of the gate strong, and then we were struggling. Then, you know, but Slam came out, and that was great. You know, I thought we had momentum. You know, the Heat was backed up a little bit, and that's when we broke up after the Heat. But we were ready to re-sign. In fact, we had re-signed, I think, to the label for 2 or 3 more records, and we were the kind of band at that time that could have worked with any producer in the world. I mean, any producer in the world that we
Sure.
wanted. We would have had support from the record label. We would have been on tour, but we broke up, you know? And it was just weird and odd because it's like, why?
Yeah.
Like, you know, why? But, you know, upon many years of reflection, I think we've all come to, you know, have some peace with that, you know, especially now that we're back together and we've rediscovered each other and just love the hell out of each other and love touring. I mean,
you can see that. That's one special thing, Dan, is, and Paul, you probably saw this in all the footage that you shot. And as you traveled with the band, fans of the band that have been around for a long time that come out and see the band now, they would never know that there was any kind of animosity ever between those members, because there's so much appreciation, gratitude, companionship on stage. I mean, these guys actually smile at each other. They're having fun the whole time on stage, and it's reflective in the crowd. It's one of the most infectious bands I've ever seen. And I never got to see the band back in the day. I was such a fan of the band, but I never got to see them until that very first reunion gig 10 years ago. There are so many fans that are chiming in on the chat as well. It's just pretty cool. And I do want to say, I mean, 2 of the people so far, you know, both Catherine Cluth and your pal Sean Case are asking, Paul, I know that because of COVID, they pushed back the release date on your film a little bit. Do you have a speculation or an idea of when you want to release the film?
I mean, it really is difficult. I mean, we're having a bit of a second lockdown here in Manchester at the moment. I know we said we're going to keep off the old the COVID business, but unfortunately, it's making work a lot harder, a lot more difficult to do. There's still, believe it or not, a few interviews that I'd still really like to get. So,
are you able to tell us who you want to talk to?
It would management, Q Prime.
Oh yeah.
So that would be fantastic. We've had some tentative conversations. We're still trying to work that out. So that would be a great one, obviously, from their point of view.
I love that. I love that email you showed me.
Yeah.
To Q Prime.
Well, because I was talking to Paul, I was like, okay, you gotta talk to Q Prime. He's like, I already tried.
Yeah.
We're working on it. Then he shows me this email that he got from Peter, which was hilarious because
Peter Mensch.
What he said at the very end. He's like, oh yeah, something. And he's like, and then that haircut. What did he say? What was it?
I said, and then there was the matter of Dan Reed's hair.
Oh,
right? I mean,
that was like the last thing on the email.
It cost them an absolute fortune. Like, I don't know, like $500,000 or something to buy out Bill Graham. It may be even more than that. It was a lot of money, and I don't think there's a lot of love. I don't know. I was getting that vibe, but who knows? But I mean, the fact that they were even talking to me is great.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I can get Peter in the room. It would be fantastic to talk to him. I mean,
it would be, and Paul, I think it would be perfectly fine to get a negative perspective.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
Sure.
that's the other thing that people need to know.
If that's
It's
still
just
how it
not
is,
a-
I mean, that they were behind us, you know,
Yeah.
and they were a big part of the reason for a lot of our success. We got on that Bon Jovi tour the moment we stepped over to Q Prime, followed right by the Rolling Stones tour. Bam, bam.
Wow.
And that happened when we signed with those guys.
Okay.
And that's no disparagement of Bill Graham.
Sure.
We all loved as a human being. It just
Yeah.
didn't take us there. And so, so Q Prime was behind us. I mean, it didn't end well with them, but they're still, they recognized what we had. And so I would love to see them, you know, their perspective, Peter, or yeah, I mean, either of them, Cliff.
They're a
Or,
massive part
Is
of-
Cliff is still involved?
yeah.
With Q Prime. I love, you know, I've seen some interviews with him with other, you know, pieces, the Metallica stuff that he's done, and some other, and he's a very interesting guy on camera. So it'd be really cool to see you, you know, land that. You know, I don't want to bypass. Catherine and Sean also asked what platform you wanted to release this on. Do you have a theater release or DVD or Netflix, or what are you going for?
we're looking at a few different options at the moment. I think there's definitely a BBC element that's a potential one that we're looking at. So a broadcast and I think theatrical. So there'd be a limited theatre release to specialist documentary theatres.
Okay.
And then eventually when it's done its rounds, there'd probably be a DVD or there'd be possibly online.
Okay.
But in that order, I think we're probably most interested in broadcast.
Are you going to submit to film festivals as well?
Yeah, that will happen.
Okay.
Sure. Really, as the film's at a developmental stage at the moment,
Sure.
you're submitting to film festivals to put it in the market, so to speak, and to get people looking at it as a work in progress, develop some interest, and then hopefully look at some pre-buys within various broadcasting regions.
When you
That's
say pre,
happened.
can you explain pre-buy? What does that term mean?
They think that you're going to make something good and they give you some money.
Investments. Okay. You know, that's one of the questions I had for you guys. Both of you are, you know, filmmakers, video editors, and producers. When you get into a project like this, it really has to become a labor of love, right? I mean, there's no way that somebody else is going to see the vision, or very rarely anybody's going to see the vision that you might and put a bunch of money behind it or any kind of backing. I've talked to some other independent filmmakers, and it's something that you have to get passionate about, first of all, and you have to be resilient, right? I mean, you talked about how some of these interviews, just to get them to happen, have taken years off your life.
Yep.
So many speed bumps, so much adversity. Then you throw in a global pandemic, right? So, you know, having to come up with a concept. I'd love to know a little bit about how you planned this out, because both in terms of how you want to produce the video, in the structure of the film, like how you want the arc to go, and then also how you're finding the way to finance it. And if you don't mind divulging that kind of stuff, I think it's really interesting for people that are behind, you know, that don't know this process.
Oh, well, I mean, the financing part is easy. We haven't got any.
Okay. Yeah. This is all.
It's kind of been done in a wing and a prayer, really. I do quite a lot of work in the States. Well, before all this shit kicked off, I was really fortunate enough to have a lot of clients in the States who fly me over frequently for work, and they just give me an open-ended ticket, which is fantastic. So they'd do all the hard work, I'd do the job for them, and then I'd fly, you know, to LA to do Richie, or to you know, to San Francisco to do Steve Van Zandt, et cetera, et cetera. So that has been really useful, as it's made travel, it's made the whole thing really possible. You know, we're constantly looking for financing, other ways to find money, and you know, like I was mentioning before, the current situation is that we're hoping to get broadcasters interested and involved and on board fairly soon. And it's such a strong story, and so many of the beat points now are still relevant now, sadly. You know, talking about the race and ethnicity part, you know, that's still exact. We only need to look out our own windows, you know, specifically in Portland, you know, to see that shit hasn't got any better for a lot of people.
Wait, is there something going on? I'm sorry. No, here's what I'm hoping is that by the time somebody might come back and look at this, maybe after the film's released, some positive things have evolved.
Maybe you'll have mailboxes. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. You know all about American politics, don't you? Yeah.
I do like to read. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, why don't we do this? If you're cool with it, Paul, you've amassed so much amazing footage. You mentioned that you might have a little bit more that you could share with us.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So I'll share with you just a little bit. This is
Hold on, before you do, I have to say this. Dan Pred, I don't know if you can see the chat on the side of this thing, but there are so many people that have been excited to see you on camera. I'm not even kidding you. People are like, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" There's Andrew Gilling and Sean Case and Sherry Hellier, and like all these people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's a Dan Pred sighting!" So this is nice to see. So, all right, Paul, go ahead.
To chime in there and say like, this was supposed to be about me,
Yeah,
and then Dan Pred come along.
I
And
can't.
fucking stole all my thunder.
No, it's not all about you, buddy. No. Actually, you know, what was really funny, you guys were talking about how when we first met Paul, it was kind of a funny story because I was like, yeah, I need the money up front. And I was like, talking, I was like, oh, this fucking Paul guy. I mean, I don't blame him. He's got to get the money up front. Dan's like, no, we're going to get him the money. And I'd be going, okay, Paul, yeah, we're going to have the money. We're going to get you the money. Dan, I got to get the money. You got the money for, and it kind of, and it all like, and Paul's like, I'm going to show up at your show and get the money. And Paul literally comes to the show and I'm like, Dan, you got the money, right? And Dan gives Paul a paper bag of cash.
Oh my God. Yeah, you know what? Here,
all of it in cash in a paper bag. Like,
anybody watching this right now, this will never happen again. So please don't pursue them in person and look for bags of cash because it's never going to happen again. So
just in my defense, I'd never heard of this band. I didn't know who these people were. And I was pulling together like a production of cameras and lights and whatever. I'm like, I don't want these guys to stiff me because I've been really screwed.
No, and yeah, I get it, man. The money up front, I would have wanted the money up front too. I just think it's so funny that, you know, you got it in cash in a bag, and you know, and you showed up to your credit and did the job quite well. And actually, Kevin, when I first met Paul, not that he wouldn't have been my first choice, but I hadn't actually been exposed to Paul's work, and I found a different director of photography in London.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Work I liked, but was unavailable or something. I
David Wright.
Oh, what was his name?
David Wright. Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
So because we were shooting in Manchester, right? That's where we did Divided.
Yeah, I just done a job with David, and we'd done Harry Styles, I think, some huge boy band thing together.
Gotcha.
And I'd forgotten that completely. Actually, yeah, he connected us, didn't he?
Yep. So he's like, yeah, no, Manchester for your budget, you know, your $250 budget, it's kind of out of the way. And so he sent me over to Paul, and I saw Paul's real work. And I was like, yeah, no, he's got it.
Great. Sherry's asking Paul, have you always been doing music business, sort of film work, or you've done it across the board, right?
Well, I started off as a very unsuccessful musician in sort of my 20s. I played with a few bands, and then when I realized I couldn't make any money whatsoever, I left that far behind me, and I moved on to working in TV, and then kind of moved into commercials and film. And yeah, that was kind of my route. And like I said, I didn't really have any delusions of grandeur in wanting to be a director. Just happened that this story literally fell into my lap when Dan Pred called me up, and we started working together and getting to know and trusting each other. And then it's fantastic that these lovely, wonderful, warm human beings have trusted me enough to tell me their stories.
You know what? I'm glad you bring up that word. The trust thing is huge, right? There's one thing to have the trust element as members of the band and members of the community, but to have an outsider, right? Somebody that really didn't know anything about the band, bringing you on the road, letting you sleep on their couch, you know, and bringing you into vulnerable places about the band. Because there's a lot of stuff that I've seen in just a little footage that I've seen that is, boy, it's humbling. You know, I mean, it's not all a pretty story, and pretty guys in the band, but not pretty stories that were, you know, and some of it is magnificent and really cool. And it shows the glory of what that band is all about. But there's real authentic stories that, you know, that paint this picture. And I'm amazed Yeah, Dan Pratt, you're pointing at him. Yeah, that's where you got it from. There's it's amazing to see how evolution has happened amongst the members of the band. And I will say that, from befriending them over the last 15, 20 years, that humility has done them all a really good. When I say them all, humility has been great for Dan Reed. I would think he'd be the first to agree that whatever happened in his life to become more humble has probably changed his outlook on not only the Dan Reed Network, but in the way he looks at the rest of the world. And he's got a lot of fans everywhere because of who he is, not because of what he was as a musician, but his voice and what he's doing. His spirit is strong. And I think it's, you look at other characters, in the music industry, you talked John Bon Jovi earlier. I think the integrity that John Bon Jovi's got right now, the guy's been cooking meals at his homeless kitchen in Jersey right now for people, that are less fortunate during the pandemic. Those are the things to me that are a lot more impressive to me than the millions of records he's sold, but maybe more so because he sold so many millions of records and he's out there cooking and cleaning all day. Dan Reed is kind of that way too. I see him really championing causes for things that are really important and for people that are less fortunate. And who knows if he ever would have been that way back in the day, right? I mean, I know his heart was there, but I think he probably let a lot of stuff get to him that got in the way. So I'm chatting more about my fanaticism, and I really do want to see some of this more of this clip. Do you mind sharing?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just will, before we do, Dan Reed is so candid about everything, and I'm sure he's probably told many people this, but he says genuinely that he wouldn't be here now today if he didn't leave the industry when he did. And there's been a couple of instances when he's talked about that. Just the whole, how much it got on his shoulders, how much it got into his mind, and just almost ruined his life. So, he had to do it when he did. And that's something that the film looks at. But linking into that, this is a little bit about Dan's story from when he was a kid.
Cool.
So I will share that with you now.
This is where I grew up, here in South Dakota. It's about 40 miles south of Aberdeen. If you've ever heard of that. You have no choice but to let your imagination run out here. So I remember thinking I'd be Spider-Man originally, and then I wanted to be Bruce Lee. And then I was driving out here, just in this field over here, listening to Kiss and Cheap Trick Records and Doobie Brothers on the radio. And I just, something about it grabbed me. It felt like that's what I want to do, and not be on a tractor all day. I had trust issues growing up. I had major trust issues. I remember this kid's just giving me a bad time, teasing me, saying, those aren't your real parents, when I was coming home from school one day. And I got in a fight. And so my mom sat me down and said, okay, here's the story. I had 2 moms and 3 dads. So I had my birth mom, my birth dad. I was adopted, so I didn't meet either one of them for a long time. And then I had my adopted parents. And then my mother remarried to another man. So I had 3 dads, 2 moms, no brothers or sisters to commiserate with or talk with or understand what life's about. And they were all lying to me about who was who, where I came from, what my real name is, what my ethnicity is. I was lied to about everything. So I didn't trust people for a long time because of that. And what they say or what they do, or it was a tough time for me to have relationships because of that. I thought everybody was a liar.
God, man, that's really heavy, and it's the first time I've seen that piece. And I will tell you, that's the experience I had with Dan Reed first. I really felt like he was so guarded. And I was, first time I think I met him, I'd been in Portland about a year, Dan Pratt, when he first was, I think, I guess right around the time that he was taking over OHM, 96 or 97, I think. And because I was a fan of the band and he had so many people that were hanging on like that, I think he had a hard time kind of letting me in a little bit, even though he knew I was friends with you. And it makes more sense and it's amazing that you got that out of him. Larry Toering is just, he's excited. He's been chatting and he saw that clip, and we got lots of hearts there. It's amazing that you got this out of him, Paul. It's great that he shares so much of that, because that is vulnerability and authenticity. And Dan Pred, did you talk to Dan Reed at all about direction, that you wanted to share in this with the film, or did you guys all separately take your pieces and have Paul sort of direct how he wanted this to go?
Exactly. None of us talked amongst each other about what we talked about. I don't think it would have worked that way. I think just having a private conversation with Paul is the only way to do it. And then we all get to see what each other said when we see the cut of the film eventually, and they're all going to go, yeah, Dan Pred, asshole. Always a troublemaker in the band. I'll be going, what?
No,
what? Did I do this?
So no. As a filmmaker, Paul, like, how do you, and because, having 5 guys take a look at this, piece or more, that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen to have final say. Do you give them final right of refusal, or do you say, guys, this is the final cut, here it is, take it or leave it?
I think, everything that they've said has come out of their mouths, has come out of their brain. You can't take things back. They've said it for a reason.
Yeah.
So, of course I would never cut anything to make it, to change the shift or the perspective on somebody. I'll always honestly put it how it is. And like, they've said some hard hitting stuff, especially about the breakup, and, Dan Pred included, and Melvin as well. They've been really forthright and honest about how it affected them as human beings, and also how it affected their lives. And perhaps some of the choices and decisions that they'd made. So like that, this isn't a puff piece. All of that's going in, because that's an important part of the story. But just going back to what you just watched, that short clip of film, I think I said something stupid to Dan Reed, like, this really needs to come from the heart, man. This really needs to be, we're sitting on his fucking parents' farm.
Yeah.
It couldn't be any more from the heart. There's like a pile of rubble in the corner, which is their old kitchen from when the house was bulldozed. And like, we sat where he used to, go skimming rocks on that little stream and whatever. So it was a daft thing for me to say, but, I think he just started talking, and some of the things that came out in that interview are jaw-droppingly, eye-openingly, mind-blowing. And, you get an understanding then of where a man has come from, and all that shit forms you as a human being completely, whether or not you don't think it has done, or whether or not you try and deny it, it absolutely does, 100%. And you can kind of see then the parity, the link between Dan Reed as a kid and the shit they had to go through, and then perhaps some of the decisions or things that had happened later on, when he talks about relationships and such like, and trust. That doesn't go away.
It's thinking about other rock biopics and documentaries that I've seen, I don't know that I've seen the breadth and depth that you've gone, to see the amount of interviews, the amount of footage. There's so much footage that you have of this band. I know that the sort of musical historian Blake Sakamoto doesn't forget a thing. He knows every date, every person. He knows when he met that person and where, what address, and it's pretty remarkable, to me, when you talk to him about any of this stuff. I love that Dan Pred pointed out, some of these dates and those specifics as well. Did you consult Blake about a lot of the finer details of places, people, places, and things?
There's 2 people who I talked to, 3 people actually, when there's stuff I don't know or I can't remember. One of them was Blake. Yeah. And then there's a fan called Amric.
Yeah.
I can't remember his second name.
Cameretta?
Yeah. What a fantastic dude he is. He's been really helpful. He mailed me a whole bunch of like home VHSs that he did of them on TV, of even footage that he took himself. Like, that was absolutely brilliant. So he's been a font of knowledge when mine has come up short. And then like Dan Pred will get like pictures from me probably at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning saying, who's this person? Why are they relevant to the story? Why should I care?
I don't know who they are either.
And he usually
I've scanned like hundreds of photos in my collection and stuff, and I'm looking at those. I'm like, well, someone in the band is in the photo, so therefore I'm going to scan it and send it to you. But who the other person is, I don't even know. And some of them were famous, and I don't even know who they are. I'm like, they look so familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. You know,
There's just generally lots of pictures of pretty girls. You know, I mean, he just doesn't know who they are.
I have seen a lot of those. Dan Reed, here's Dan Reed with like famous celebrities. Trying to think of the movie starlet that he had a short dating term with, right? Dan Pred.
I can't remember.
Oh, that's okay. There's a million of them out there. But did he send you this stuff at all? Did he get trading cards? And
I didn't get that, man.
We've got this shirt, this card actually made into this shirt.
Yeah, I need that in my life.
Yeah,
I need a damn red shirt.
Those are collectibles, but fans will appreciate these guys. Those trading cards. You know, I didn't know if this made the documentary or not, but the formation of these trading cards was pretty interesting. I know they're worth a bunch. They've got to be, right? So this is my retirement fund. Yeah. And then this must have been post decision, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess these won't be worth as much as the pre-haircut Dan Reed, but I got them all, so I'll keep those in the vault. Oh, and Sherry Hellier says she has those too. Darn it, I thought I was the only one. Dan Pred, have you watched all the footage now that Paul has compiled for this film?
I haven't seen all of it. In fact, Paul, and my apologies, Paul did send me a rough cut, more than just the sizzle reel, and I have yet to watch it.
Mate, it's all changed since then. I wouldn't watch it. It's so out of date.
Well, and honestly, Paul, Paul had sent me this rough cut, and you go, hey, tell me what you think so far. And I was going to watch it, but then I was sort of hesitant to watch it because I didn't want to get into this, this thing. Like, I don't want to start offering criticism. So I'm just going to hold off on even watching it. But then I still wanted to, but then I forgot. And I don't even know where the link is.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I didn't want to get into this thing. I was like, well, because I'm an editor also. And so I didn't want to feel like, I like something different who needs that? I'll see it when it's done. I'll see things as it comes along, but I'll see it when it's done. It'll be fine. It's going to be exciting, actually, just to see it unvarnished, the unvarnished.
That's exactly why I asked. I mean, I know it's really tough to have a critical eye, having been behind the camera and editing and all that it would be tough, especially when it's subject matter all about you and your family, right? So yeah. I would think that as members of the network, getting to see perspective, because it's so untainted, right? Paul, I would imagine you sort of feel like these guys have become family over the last few years that you've worked on this thing, both good and bad, right? Because it's cost you a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, time, money, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I probably feel closer to them than they do to me. I see their faces, almost every day.
Yeah.
Myself and the editor, Ben Sutherland, who I'm working with on this project, they've never even met him. They don't know him from Adam, but we're all talking. We've got nicknames for all of them,
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, you spend a lot of time in a dark room with someone, all kinds of shit comes out. So we know all the footage, and we're kind of like picking things out and putting them in here and seeing how they work. And Dan knows how this works.
Yeah.
So you kind of go a little bit stir crazy after a while. But I think definitely for Ben, who's never even met the guys and they've never even met him, but I'm sure he would walk into the room and it would be a very surreal experience for him, because he would feel like he knew. Like I said, I'd watched so many of your programs. I'd watched 2 or 3 of them. I'd watched the Rob Dacre one and the Terry Finley one. So before we actually met, virtually, I felt like I knew you. It was kind of weird, but like that.
That's, if you haven't yet, check out the Melvin Brannon interview for the other day too. That was incredible amount of fun. I can't. It's unfortunate that I think I'm laughing the entire way through, but we're gonna have to have a part 2 because he made me laugh so hard that I almost cried. But we talked a bunch about early history of the band, his introduction to the band, and we didn't get into really much in the way of evolution after, but I think everybody's going to have a little bit different perspective on what they did between the time that the band, quote unquote, broke up and then reformed, because it really never was a breakup, right, Dan?
Not officially, no, but we were broke up. I mean,
Yeah,
like
you were dating other people.
15 years later, it's like, I think we're broke up. I mean,
Right.
you know, I never got the memo, but
Yeah.
So, you know,
So,
yeah.
Paul, for you then, you know, just where do you go from here?
Great question. I mean, we're honing the first act. So we're using the traditional 3-act structure. We're honing the first act, and that's about 22 minutes. You just saw 2 clips from that, the beginning and kind of the middle. Like from my point of view, it's a continuing to develop, and documentary making it's more about taking things out than it is about putting something in. It's finding the bits that take out, and then you just find, okay, well, I moved that bunch of the story there, and we're trying to create that particular part of the emotion as we're going up to the middle of the second act. Then we want to have the big crash down, and we all know what that is, and then we want it going back up again. So it's crafting all those parts. So it takes you on a real emotional journey, you know, and there is as you've seen, there's a lot of emotion in it. So that's my job, and that's what I'll keep on doing. And hopefully at some point we'll find a little bit of money, and we can push this thing on to the next level.
So are you taking angel investors right now? People that want to invest in getting this thing done?
People got money, call me up. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm. You know, if there is any kind of foundation or anything that I can put as we archive this and we have it on the page, a lot of network fans would probably gladly pay into some kind of, you know, fund to get this thing done, or anybody out there.
The network fans are amazing, and they put into enough. I think this is something that needs to be done separately of that.
Okay.
I've met so many of them, and they're fantastic people, and they're incredibly generous with what they do. Yeah, this needs to be looked at in a different way.
They might know someone. So if folks, if you're watching this, Jules Carly, I see you there. Hi, nice to see you. If you've got, you know, friends out there that are interested in investing in a major project like this, this is obviously not somebody's basement project. This is a really well documented, incredibly well produced piece. And I think, you know, if there's any way, Paul, that you can, you know, at least point me to have people contact you. I would love to see somebody be able to add to the coffers to put this together, because it's probably hard to justify taking time away from other paying work to finish your labor of love. But I know personally, for me, it's such an amazing opportunity to see the entire formation of the story. It's really cool that we've got a really happy ending to this right now too. You know, that the band is, you know, it's amazing how much support there is, that there is a new record coming out. And I will say, my God, the stuff that I heard blows my mind. It is so big. And not that the other stuff that you guys have come out with, Dan Pred, in the last couple of years, but this new record to me is iconic. It's huge. It's so big sounding that I'm blown away. You know, it's goosebump moments time. And so folks, if you're Dan Reed Network fans out there, this is not me blowing smoke up because I've got them on this this line here. This is gonna be a really, really good album.
I gotta agree with that. From what I've heard, it's an absolute, what we say in England, it's a fucking banger.
It is. Yeah, it is. You know, just to wrap up, I got a couple more questions here from folks. Andrew Gillings asked Paul, when it eventually does get to DVD or online after the broadcast, would you release it as a director's cut so we get the behind the scenes stuff and some of the other pieces?
You know what, we probably would do. Yeah, I think we'd release the film certainly in its full length, and then there'd maybe be some deleted scenes, because there's a lot of footage. There's a lot of deleted scenes. There's some outtakes, and there's some funny stories, interesting stories, like, you know, 1980s, 1990s naughty boy band stories.
Oh yeah,
may or may not work their way into the film, so they'll definitely see the light of day somehow.
It better. I want that director's cut.
So yeah. I mean, with the amount of footage that's got going, there'll definitely be some kind of additional footage for fans, I'm sure.
Right on. And you know, Catherine Cluth is asking, do you have an idea who you would want to document next?
Man, that's a good question.
Thank you. No, sorry, that's not mine.
I don't know. I've found out from this project that you know, interesting things happen when you say yes. And like, you know, that was going right back to the beginning of our conversation, which is what you do in documentary filmmaking.
Right.
When you get to the end, you move back to the beginning.
Right.
And when Dan Pred said, "Hey, do you want to come make this film? Do you want to come make the Divided and whatever?" And I was like, "Oh man, I don't know who these guys are."
Right.
Whatever. You know, so thank goodness I did say yes, because it's been an amazing journey. You know, on my own and also with these guys as well, getting to know them has been a fantastic thing. So, yeah.
You know what my suggestion? I think it'd be really interesting, since you've already been there in Calabasas. I'd love to hear Richie's perspective on what happened with Bon Jovi, man.
I don't think Richie can remember, to be honest.
Maybe you have it. Maybe that was a little sides.
No, yeah, I know some of those stories from other guys involved, but I think as a filmmaker, you know, documentary filmmaker, I think it'd be pretty interesting to make the Bon Jovi movie. You know, it'd be interesting anyway. Yeah, so, you know, sure. But you'd have to spend a lot more time over here in the US and you guys won't let us over there right now either. Oh, actually you will. The UK is letting us over there. It's about the only place we can go.
I think you've got to come over, and you might have to quarantine for 14 days or something like that.
Right.
You know, we'll have to make sure, you know, you don't vote for any orange people, and then we'll let you in.
Okay, that sounds good. You got my vote, man. A lot of people here have said that they've got you've got their vote as well. Tons of people are interested in this documentary. So I know not just fans, but other people that really weren't huge fans of the network, but came over out of interest of my promotion here. So folks, if you haven't yet, take my first recommendation. The Heat's my favorite record of the three, and then work your way back and listen to the formation from the beginning. Self-titled record, amazing. Slam is unbelievable. But then you'll be all ready for this new record coming out, which has maybe a release date of when, Dan Pred?
Oh God, I don't know. You know, I think we had a theoretical date at some point near, I don't know what month it is. What month is it?
Today it's August.
My calendar. It was supposed to come out at near the end of the year or something. But you know, we have a tour scheduled. Dates are booked. I've made the promo video. I hope we can go. and I think it would be out by then. And
okay.
And I mean, Paul, do you think the film is going to come out at the same time as the new record? Is it sort of a?
No, I don't think it is. But what I can say is, preceding all that, I don't know when Dan is planning to do the music videos, but I know, as in release the music videos, but I will be going to Prague next week to shoot what will be Dan Pred will edit. Dan is
where's my test footage, dude?
Yeah, man, you're gonna get all the good stuff. Don't worry.
Yeah, you were gonna.
Shit. Yes, I was gonna send you some footage. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
This is what goes on behind the scenes, folks.
I've written it down. So I'm getting told off right here.
No, this is good.
So Dan Reed has written this fantastic script, and I'm not saying that to play many lips of it. It's a great script, and he's come up with a story, and I can't give away anything or say anything other than that he's written the music videos into a script. It's a brilliant piece. I'm sure he's talking about it now. I think there's a Facebook page, I think, that someone set up, which is telling you probably more than I can. And yeah, we start shooting on the 22nd. So I think that's Friday next week. I can't remember.
That's right.
And we're shooting for 6 or 7 days in Prague. We've got a whole crew, actors, actresses, lighting technicians, cameras, the whole business. It's being done properly. And I know he's like so zoned in with this at the moment. It's a fantastic script. It's going to be great.
Oh man, I love that people are being productive during this time. You know, it's a crazy time for everybody out there, but I think, you know, for the fans of the band, for fans of Dan Reed, it's really cool to know that there's new music coming out. There's great film and video coming out. Dan Pred, I know that you've been as busy as you ever have been, which is fantastic. And Paul, I would not have met you at all if it weren't for Dan Pred And, I'm just really grateful to see the efforts that you're doing. It's such a cool thing. So on behalf of the rest of the fans that are chiming in here, I want to thank you for the blood, sweat, tears, time, money, everything, lack of sleep, whatever your families had to put up with, I'm really excited to see this come out. And so whatever I can do to promote, I'll make sure that I archive this on the website. We'll have links to contact you. And Dan Pred, why don't you send me that promo video for the new record? I'll add that into the into the archive as well. If anybody else has any questions, they can certainly find Paul Mortlock on Facebook, right?
Easy to find. You just Google my name, you can find me. Very
cool.
easy.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Paul, you stayed up late on a weekend night for me, and I really appreciate it. Hopefully, stay quarantined and you get your Heineken. That's all. You're partying with us on a Saturday night, man. How lucky are we? There we go.
Great. It's great.
Dan Pred, I love you, buddy. Thank you for spending time in front of the camera and behind the camera. I really am grateful. Sean Case says Dan Reed Network brings people together. So, folks, thank you again. If you have not yet, subscribe to this YouTube channel. There will be all sorts of great interviews coming up. You've already seen Melvin Brannon. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel. Dig back in. Melvin was about 2 weeks ago. We got Rob Dacre just before that. We've got a forthcoming one. I know that I'm going to get Dan Pred on, and we'll see if we can get Dan Reed on as well. So subscribe to the channel. Hit up Paul Mortlock on Facebook, and then watch for the new Dan Reed Network album. Thanks again to 5 Star Guitars for being here for me. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Be great to each other and be good humans. Thanks again, you gentlemen. I'll talk to you later. Peace.